Hi guys, and welcome to another Brown Car Guy and Buddies, and today I'm going to be talking to a friend of mine, Jim Murray Jones, who basically has been there pretty much throughout the evolution of digital automotive media here in the UK. In fact, there's some parallels between what I was doing and what he was doing in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But the sheer breadth of titles that he's worked on is incredible. Everything from AutoTrader, Exchange and Mart, he's worked at Haymarket on things like WhatCar and Autocar. He was on the team that bought PistonHeads, and he worked on DriveTribe. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to be learning from him, actually, I should say. And in fact, I'm going to try and get some tips myself in terms of my own platform, what I should be doing. But as somebody who's basically is an expert when it comes to marketing and growing digital platforms, this is going to be fascinating. Before we get into this, make sure that you are subscribing to my channel, because I've got to do my marketing bit. That is, of course, youtube.com/browncarguy. Make sure you follow me on all social media channels. Just search for #browncarguy. You can see it on my hat there. That's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, subscribe to browncarguy.com. Cool. Let's get into this. Hey Jim, how are you doing? It's been a while since I've seen you. How have you been keeping during the whole lockdown thing?
Shazad, I have missed you. I'm keeping very well, apart from my haircut. I was tempted to get a COVID trim before we had this, but I didn't want to put it off any longer. So I'm
Have
doing
you,
very well.
hang on, so have you not had a haircut yet?
I have, yeah, I
Right,
had a
okay.
haircut a while back, but it's starting to go a bit wild again.
Yeah.
Um, and I couldn't really delay you another week. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible how I was talking to some friends of mine online, and we were talking about things like, is it safe to go to the cinema and stuff like that, you know? And one of them said, oh, I was so excited. I went out to eat with my friends after. And I said, isn't it amazing how the little things that we used to take for granted are now so important to us?
It is so bizarre, isn't it? If you were to sort of say to us a year ago, we would be in this situation, you wouldn't believe it. But yeah, going out to a pub or a restaurant is quite a special moment now.
Yeah, that's something, isn't it? I think we should cherish these moments, isn't it? So you and I met, what was it, just a year and a half ago, probably? Something like that?
Possibly a bit
Yeah,
longer, a couple of years back.
yeah,
But
could be.
yeah, I was
Something
at
like that.
DriveTribe,
Yep, you're
and
wearing a Drive Tribe shirt there, and you were at Drive
yeah,
Tribe at the time. And
yeah,
yeah, it was great to meet you. And we found that there was a commonality in our histories as well, didn't we? And it
we
related
have.
way back to 1999, didn't it?
We've been leading sort of parallel lives, blissfully ignorant to each other. But now, all the much better for knowing you.
So you, because I mean, the stuff that you sent me. So you're 20 years. You've been directing. I mean, you're a marketing guy, and you're a sales guy, but you've been directing sort of digital strategy and commercial growth, particularly to do with automotive. And it's incredible the lineup of brands that you've worked for. I mean, everything from AutoTrader to Autocar, WhatCar, PistonHeads, Exchange. We're going to go through some of this stuff, but I mean,
Mm.
it's a remarkable journey and very, very automotive focus. But you started with FT.com in 1996.
I did. I kind of fell into it by accident. I actually wanted to be a journalist, and
All right.
yeah, so I went around to all the various newspapers in London and kind of got hold of their internal vacancies list. And one of the first that came up trumps was the FT. And I
Uh-huh.
took a job in their sales team, newspaper sales team, thinking that, naively you could somehow make the bridge from sales into editorial. Um, and I was, having a very happy time doing a sort of very low level newspaper type sales, advertising space. And along came FT.com. They launched FT.com. It was a chance to get a bit of a promotion, get a bit more money. I went for it. At the time, the internet was, very new.
I
When I
was,
tried,
I was going to say that was in its infancy. That was like actually a little bit before it actually started to get useful.
absolutely. So some of the advertising slots I was selling at the time didn't actually link anywhere. They were just like almost
Mm.
newspaper style billboards. Um, And it was quite a hard sell, you know,
Yeah.
ringing up all the agencies. And the constant refrain I got was, oh, the internet's just a fad. It'll all be
Yeah.
over by the end of the year. So, yeah, it was quite a tough sell. And I wish I'd kept the names of all those media people that I rang up who told me in no uncertain terms to go away and not darken their door, that the internet wouldn't be there at the end of the year. Because, yeah, as I said, it was a tough sell, but it kind of turned within the
Yeah.
space of a year. It went from zero to hero, and all of a sudden it became the easiest job in the world.
So tell me
Um,
this. I mean, apart from all those people that actually, to be honest, people have still got their head in the sand when it comes to the internet even today. But all the way back in '96, I mean, a young Jim Murray Jones starting out in the industry. And that must have been quite a leap of faith to go, oh, this internet thingy, I think that might work. Did you actually think it would work, or do you think, let me try this out for a while?
Um, yeah, I felt like I was part of this inner circle, this club, and it was very exciting. You know, you go to all the launch events for brands that, you know, that seem like distant memories now, Alta Vista and
Yeah.
FreeServe, NTL and so on.
GeoCities was another one, wasn't it?
Yeah, all those types of brands. And you would go to these launch events, which were pretty much every other day in London, and you would literally know everyone in the room. And you felt like you were part of this little club. And then speed forward a few years, and it just ballooned. It was a little bit disappointing when it got to that stage because you realised that everyone was involved, and
Yeah,
no longer were you sort of like
yeah,
you know in a small pond type
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, so those early days were really exciting.
They were exciting, but around that time, so when you say it ballooned, I mean that's when serious money started to get involved, isn't it? So when I joined EMAP in I think
Mm,
it was early '99 probably, there was a department called EMAP Digital, which I
yeah.
think was its first foray into sort of creating complementary websites to magazines and stuff like that. And I joined to work on the websites for car magazine and classic car magazine. So it was called Car World and Classic Car World to give it a more generic sort of feel. Um, was that the time that you were then moved across to AutoTrader?
Well, I actually went to British Airways after the
All right.
FT, and I kind of jumped fence from sales into marketing. And it was still the early days of the internet, so there weren't really that many digital agencies in the UK. We had to rely on an agency over in New York,
Mhm.
which meant every other week I was kind of jumping on a flight to go over and see them, which
Which
again
is
was
kind of
really
cool.
exciting. It was just brilliant. And then the agency, they were called agency.com, funnily enough, they went and bought a company in the UK called Online Magic, and agency.com sort of took off in the UK, which sort of sadly brought an end to my flights to New York. Instead, it was trips up to King's Cross
All right.
to see the guys there, or initially it was
Not
solo,
quite
which
as glamorous.
it wasn't, but yeah, again, it was a great time. Sort of seeing all the early sort of pioneering types of internet advertising emerge that were
Yeah,
some have fallen by the wayside, some have become sort of standard
yeah.
products now.
And so when did you join AutoTrader? I mean, and also you've got Exchange and Mart on your
Yeah, yeah.
portfolio as well. I mean, I remember the days, back, when I was young, and we used to go and buy copies of AutoTrader, which was like that thick, and then Exchange
Mm.
and Mart, which was even thicker, and then go through them. I mean, what a transition it's been between, printed classifieds to now surfing online all day long.
Yeah, so I joined AutoTrader in September '99, and at the time, I remember thinking that I don't want to sound the wrong way, but I felt like I was going a bit down market because I'd worked for these big blue chips, FT.com and
Yeah.
British Airways, both quite prestigious brands. And at the time, AutoTrader was more like the sort of tatty magazine you'd find in the quick fit waiting room. And so I joined it. They had a website. It had a great quantity of cars on it because it had kind of harvested them from the magazine. Yeah, what it had as its big USP was it's just so functionally driven,
Uh-huh.
and it had the content on it. So yeah, I joined at a great time, really. I was very lucky.
And had they already decided at that point that we're going to go predominantly online in terms of classifieds and in terms of putting all the database of cars for sale online?
Uh, no, they hadn't decided that at that point, and I was kind of joining a bit of a political cauldron.
Yeah.
The site was actually launched by two guys, a chap called Lee Williams on the sort of marketing and product side, and someone called Tim Jones, who now works for Money Supermarket in a very sort of senior technical role. Yeah, I inherited it as a sort of product director. And on day one, Lee Williams told me he was leaving and going to New Zealand to start up a new business. So I kind of inherited a lot of his old role. It had that kind of first mover advantage in some ways because it had 120,000 vehicles that it harvested straight from the magazine. So I had a great sort of building block, if you like, a set of tools that I could use to construct something quite compelling.
But I mean, at the time, going from EMAP Digital, I ended up at Parker's because we were already working on a website for Parker's at the time. And as all of these things were experiments, when EMAP decided that EMAP Digital wasn't really working for them, I had an option either to leave or to move across to Parker's because I'd already been working on developing their website. And of course, at Parker's, there was this whole thing that oh, this is an interesting little exercise, let's do this. But, actually the Parker's guide is the main thing that we do. And it sells, I think at the time, it would sell about 50,000 copies regularly. And then they were like, okay, but if we put all our prices on here, how is it going to affect our print product? There was a lot of that kind of thinking at the time. So you must have encountered the same sort of, problems at AutoTrader.
Yeah, as I said, there's a bit of a political cauldron. The website had been allowed to generate almost in isolation in a kind of incubator environment. And all of a sudden it started to become quite big. And the 12 magazine MDs from AutoTrader that operated the various regional AutoTrader magazines, they sort of fell into two camps. There were some that recognized that this was the future, and whether they liked it or not, as magazine MDs, they should try to embrace it. And there were others that were quite anti it, and they felt like it was cannibalizing the existing business. And that was quite a challenging environment to be in. One of the first things I did when I joined was I led a redesign of the platform. We went out and found an agency and we gave the site a lovely new lick of paint and sort of improved the functionality. And I then had to go on a tour of all the magazine centres to introduce the website. And I got completely different responses depending on where I went. So there were some places where everyone was sort of arms folded and, and feeling like I was about to take their job.
Oh my God.
And, were really quite anti it. And others that were just fascinated and wanted to get involved. It was a sort of transitionary time in AutoTrader's evolution. But at that point, we still very much depended on the magazine. It was a big route to market. That we by no stretch had the level of internet penetration that we do now. So we needed the website and the magazine side by side. So we were kind of helping each other out. But there did come a point when we were sort of threatening the survival of the magazine.
So in early 2000, so by that time I'd also launched the Parker's website. And this was, like you say, running parallel to what you were doing at AutoTrader. And we actually became the second biggest automotive website in the UK after AutoTrader. Of course, because of the classified traffic, you were number one. But early 2000s, there was a kind of a dot-com bust then, wasn't there? That's when suddenly companies have been putting a lot of money into the internet, and then suddenly it kind of fizzled out for a bit. What do you think sort of precipitated that? And do you think it was a good thing or a bad thing? Because maybe we were growing too quickly at the time.
I think it probably was a good thing. A few years later, I got involved with buying a business, and I kind of experienced the world of VCs and venture capitalists. And I kind of saw the almost blind leading the blind sort of environment where people with lots of money were just desperate to invest in different places. And you had all these ridiculous inflated prices on websites.
Yeah.
I remember the adverts for, was it Yahoo at the time, or I'm trying to remember who it was, sort of claiming that they were bigger than British Airways and they were bigger than all these established businesses. And they weren't really. It was AOL, I think, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, we're bigger than British Airways now. We're big, and those were their press adverts.
Yeah.
And they weren't. It was just sort of paper money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was probably a healthy thing that happened. Because it sort of exposed a lot more thinking needed to go into, evaluating the quality of the people running a website and evaluating whether there was a sound business model at the heart of it, as opposed to just relentlessly building audience numbers, which was the sort of currency at the time for telling whether anything was worth investing in.
But also it was a case of trying to understand how to make the internet an actual use, because now we turn to the internet for everything. It's kind of hard for people, maybe some people watching this video, to quite comprehend that the internet at the time really was just a novelty. It was like, you could go and surf a few things and look at a few funny GIFs, but that was it. And there wasn't really that much functionality. So like at Parkers, we were very focused on not just providing the prices, but we created this, an early version of an app really, which was called the Parkers Chooser, which would help people to drill down and to get a short list of cars that met their needs. And that was quite innovative at the time.
Yes, and I think the other thing that was very important was to think about the platform as a two-sided business model, which has since become quite a recognised expression, where you're effectively building two sides to the vortex. You've got to have the products to bring in the consumers at one end, but you've also got to have the technology at the back end to lure in the advertisers, and they're both kind of self-reinforcing till you create this vortex of growth. And AutoTrader was very clever at that. We built a platform that enabled dealers to very easily upload their vehicles and then to manage their stock. So if they wanted to send them to Exchange and Mart or eBay or wherever else, they went through AutoTrader's stock management platform, which meant it kind of controlled the value chain, and it controlled how vehicles were distributed across the internet. So it became that essential linchpin, if you like, of how stock was distributed. And then the next stage was to offer dealers websites. So at the time, you can imagine they were all clamoring for websites. Everyone had to have a website in those days. So we could use the stock export to input into a set of different templated websites, which all of a sudden meant that dealers were not only dependent on us for their presence on AutoTrader, the magazine and the website, they're also
their own website.
using us for their own website. And then it became a case of adding a whole series of bells and whistles to enhance that product even further. So we gave them business intelligence tools so that they could see, the supply and demand for vehicles in their local area. And that just made AutoTrader more and more essential to their daily lives. So that was kind of all about thinking beyond the basics of having a website. And I often describe the website as being like the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, there was this whole engine of dealer-focused technology that was designed to just make their lives easier and to help them run their businesses. And creating those two sides to the vortex that made AutoTrader the success it was.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because it's kind of monopolistic empire building, isn't it? I mean, you're creating a platform that essentially is like, that's the only place you can go because we've created these essential tools and we were the first people to do so. It's an extraordinary opportunity, and I suppose it was the exciting part of being there right at the beginning of when the internet was becoming usable.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you should use that word monopolistic, because that was the challenge. We were becoming, I guess, so good at what we were doing that some dealers began to think that we were kind of too dominant, and there was quite an awkward phase, I think, in AutoTrader's evolution where there was a bit of a backlash where people felt it was too dominant. I think they've played quite a clever course where they had that rocky period where some dealers may have felt that they were kind of held to ransom and they had to spend on AutoTrader, and if AutoTrader hiked their prices, they had to cancel advertising elsewhere.
Yeah.
That was probably quite an issue at one stage, but I think they kind of navigated that challenge now, and they're a very different business. They're a huge beast now compared to when I was there.
Do you think Exchange and Mart suffered because of that strategy? Because when in the print world, Exchange and Mart and AutoTrader, I remember them as pretty much equal rivals. But on the online world, I don't think Exchange and Mart is anywhere near what AutoTrader is.
Yeah, well, I later went on to do some work for Exchange and Mart, and they were definitely our big rivals in those early days. I think they didn't take the same measures to invest in their dealer technology at the back end and to build dealer websites and to kind of build the bits beneath the surface, that iceberg, that big stuff underneath. And they also went for a platform that was broader in its offering. So, it tried to cover everything off from, everyday household items through to cars. So they were trying to cover everything, whereas AutoTrader was much more sort of single-minded, focused on automotive.
So I want to move on from that, and I want to talk about when you moved to Haymarket. And so Haymarket obviously is famous for Autocar magazine and WhatCar magazine. But so again, these are the early. When would that have been? What year would that have been?
That was 2006.
2006. Okay, so the internet was getting well developed by that time, but magazine publishers were still sort of floundering a little bit about what to do with magazines and the internet. And obviously, WhatCar particularly, I think, really lends itself to the internet. But you did something very interesting there. You went out as part of a team and you bought PistonHeads. Yeah. What was the thinking behind that for a major publisher such as Haymarket?
Well, at the time, social media was just gathering ahead of steam, and everyone was aware of MySpace. Facebook was this growing weed that was already.
It was still nascent at that stage, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah. So social media was, the big topic of the day,
But back then it was all about bulletin boards, though. This is pre-social media and Facebook. We were all on bulletin boards and discussion pages and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we were, and Facebook kind of PistonHeads stuck out as the major bulletin board, the major forum in automotive. And in traffic terms, it was the only site that was coming close to AutoTrader at that point. AutoTrader was sailing off into the lead in terms of traffic at that stage. It was advertising on telly. It was sort of really investing heavily in its marketing. But PistonHeads was one of the few sites that was sort of nipping at its heels and generating traffic of its own through this sort of network effect. So everyone wanted it. All the brands are out to try and buy PistonHeads. Haymarket got it, and it was when I first joined, and again that was quite an exciting moment for the team. Slightly nerve-wracking as well because we didn't know exactly what we were buying. It was, the social.
This is the thing. As a publisher, as an established institutional publisher, publishers are all about creating their own content and distributing their own content. PistonHeads is about community. And like you say, you've bought this thing and you're going, okay, what do we do with it now? How do we capitalize on it? How do we plug it into our existing systems? What was the thinking there?
That was the big dilemma, because we didn't want to be seen as a moneyed corporate that had bought this platform that was adored by its fans, and for the former owner to have sort of sailed off into the sunset with loads of money or whatever. We definitely didn't want that. We wanted to keep that ethos, that sort of spirit of entrepreneurship. So in those early days, we didn't really want to touch it too
Yeah.
much. We wanted it to just build out. We wanted to very much support Petrol Ted, the founder, Dave Edmondson, who was the sort of hero figure of the platform in some ways. He built it in his bedroom. It was very important that we kept that sort of pioneering a sort of spirit alive. And our role, I guess, was to bring some of our, well-respected journalists into the fold so that we could begin to bring in news and other comment into the platform and give a bit more of an editorial edge to it.
And what was the reaction of journalists? Because I know back then there was a lot of resistance from journalists when it came to telling them to do stuff on these new platforms.
There was. I think they realised that this was a way in which Haymarket had a big traffic platform that could begin to make a difference in a digital space where AutoTrader had been pretty dominant. So alongside its other automotive brands like WhatCar and Autocar and Classic and Sports Car, PistonHeads was an essential element. So there was no shortage of particularly sort of young and upcoming journos that wanted to get involved with it. In some ways, I wish I'd stayed at Haymarket longer to have seen how it had flourished, but I was kind of lured away by other things. And it was it was quite an exciting time.
No, lots of stuff going on at the time, and you've seen a lot of different aspects of automotive and digital automotive. And you've also worked at what was it, News UK Automotive and the SunMotors and the Sunday Times.
Yeah. Well, that was a few years later. I think it was about 2013. Yeah, something like that. At the time, News UK was, automotive advertising is always hugely important to, a newspaper group, and they wanted to kind of expand their automotive offering. So they launched Sunday Times Driving, which was a classified platform. At the time, it was just sort of targeting the premium end of the market, but it was recognised that the Sun was the big volume product within the News UK stable, so it made sense to have SunMotors to kind of buttress Sunday Times Driving, for the two to stand side by side, so that Sunday Times Driving might be useful to lure in the sort of premium advertisers, and SunMotors might be good to lure in the sort of volume brands. Those were they were great sites actually, because they kind of combined the real high quality editorial values of the News UK group, which was, I guess, my first experience of Jeremy Clarkson as well, because he was one of
I was going to say, is there a link here? Because you were at Sunday Times, and Jeremy Clarkson used to, well, I think does still write for them, doesn't he? And then you were at DriveTribe, which is obviously the creation of Clarkson, Hammond and May.
Yeah, well, I didn't have anything to do with Jeremy Clarkson per se at that point, because that was kind of owned by the newspaper journalists, and in particular the editor of Sunday Times Driving, a chap called Nick Rufford. So he sort of managed the Clarkson relationship. But we obviously benefited from all the content that he brought to the platform, and it was a significant lever for particularly in social media circles, to bring traffic to the site. So I never actually met him in those days. It wasn't until later at DriveTribe that I met him. He's obviously such a big name in automotive, and a fantastic asset when you need to attract traffic to a platform.
No doubt about it. So DriveTribe then, were you there at the beginning, or you joined it later on?
Yeah, I joined. I think it'd been going for about a year and a half before
Right.
I joined.
Uh-huh.
I joined as CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, but in
Mm.
reality, it was a digital startup, so my role was a lot broader than just
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah.
It was a case of all hands to the pump
Yeah.
and everyone get involved with everything. So,
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis, I could be trying to build a partnership over in the US or trying to help the sales team land
Yeah.
a new client.
But
Um,
before we get into that though, but DriveTribe itself, because when DriveTribe first launched, I think it confused a lot of people because people
yeah.
were like, "What actually is it? What is it meant to do?"
Mm,
Because if people were thinking that okay, instead of Top Gear magazine, they're now going to create a digital editorial platform, it wasn't quite that. If people
yeah.
thought they're creating a kind of PistonHeads community thing, it wasn't necessarily that either. I think for a lot of it, even when I first signed up to it, and I was there for maybe a couple of months, and then I kind of gave up with it because again, I don't think it had found its feet at that point.
Yeah. And those views were shared by a lot of the people internally, and we kind of wanted to let it grow and find its own place. Um, Perhaps we could have been better at kind of defining what it is, but at its heart, for me, DriveTribe is a user-generated content platform that
Hmm.
enables people, amateur content producers,
Yeah,
to build a portfolio of their work,
yeah,
whether they are photographers, filmmakers, writers, car designers that want to share their designs,
mhm,
and to kind of build this portfolio of work using what is a very effective content management platform. And then on top of that, to build a following of fans, if you like, that they can interact with.
yeah,
Um, and in some ways, user-generated content as a term had kind of fallen out of fashion in some ways. It had
yeah.
been much more a term of the sort of, I don't know, 2005, 2006 era,
Mm.
and people were more talking about social networking. So we wanted to describe ourselves as a sort of social network, but I think we were more of a sort of user-generated content platform
Mm.
that enabled these people to create this identity, to build their portfolio. And for me, the most rewarding thing was sort of building a relationship with, an
Yeah,
online relationship with some of these amateur content
yeah,
producers
yeah,
who were great guys.
yeah. No, it's an incredible platform. I think you're right. It has given a lot of people some great opportunities to create content and to get their content out there. So, as always, we're against the clock here. Before we move on to what you're doing currently, um, with all of this experience, it's inevitable that I'm going to pick your brains a little bit because obviously
Right.
you know me and you know what I've been doing, and I've actually created a platform in the Middle East,
Yeah.
mostly in the Middle
Yeah.
East.
Yeah.
I've worked in print, I've worked in digital here as well. Now I'm kind of starting from scratch, so I'm creating my new platform, Brown Carguy, in addition to working with some other people as well. I mean, what would be your top tips for somebody like me who's trying to create this automotive platform from scratch today?
Well, Shazad, your content, I have to say, personality that kind of exudes through it, and the sort of uniqueness of the style, and the passion, above all, the passion and the sort of the knowledge that you have within the sort of automotive space. And so I've got a huge amount of time. In terms of what you're doing, spreading your presence across all these platforms and creating, that identity, brand car guy that is sort of has that consistency across the different channels. I think that's fantastic, and your work output is just a credit. Uh, I think it's a case of just building that network and kind of getting on the sort of radar of the people that have already made it. And I
Mm.
can see that that is happening, and
Yeah,
you're doing that. But yeah, so I almost feel sort of humbled by some of the people that you've interviewed in this series before me. But that is all very much the right thing to do because
yeah,
you're kind of getting on the radar of all those bigger names
yeah,
within the sort of celebrity edge of automotive. But yeah, that kind of mixture of video content and social content and written content and the
yeah,
expertise that goes with it, I can't fault that.
yeah,
And yeah, and creating that kind of identity with it as well, I think is an enormous credit to you. So I want to you know, see this hit the big time. I
Oh,
can see you with your TV program, Brown Car Guy. You know, at some point, I would love to. I would be your first #1 fan.
oh man, you're so sweet. You're so kind. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to blush now. So let's move quickly on to Automotion Events, which is, of course, the
Yeah,
big news. Motor show that was supposed to happen this year, didn't happen. It's going to hopefully, you know, God willing, happen next year. I'm really looking forward to it because I was there at the press conference. And as I was listening to the press conference, I was basically seeing my own vision of an automotive event unfold. And I was like, wow, this is exactly how I perceive it to be. We haven't got a lot of time left, but what are your hopes and aspirations for things like the motor show in an era where admittedly motor shows are seeing somewhat of a decline?
yeah, but this is a very different type of motor show. This is all about you know, experiencing automotive in all its shapes and guises. Whether you're a classics fan and you want to meet the sort of the clubs, the motoring clubs that are there, or whether you're in the market to buy something and you want to see the range of vehicles on sale today, whether you're an enthusiast and you want to meet, you know, bigger name journalists and sort of seek their advice in some of the on-stage debates. So it's much more experiential than, you know, a historic motor show that you go along to see the launches and so on. It's at a new venue. It's in Farnborough, which gives a lot more space. You know, so there are 5 halls at the moment that are going to be stuffed full of content in different themed areas. We're looking at additional space because we may need to go
Wow.
beyond that. And of
Wow.
course, with Farnborough, it's an airfield, so
Yeah.
there's space outside for test driving facilities.
Yeah.
You know, from a corporate point of view, there are sort of chalets that
Yeah.
can be used for things like corporate hospitality. It's taking place over 4 days. The first day is very much a trade day. So we have a careers expo that will be there. That's going to be backed by the IMI. Yeah, there will be no Geneva Motor Show next year or Paris
Yeah.
Motor Show.
Yeah.
Those are off the agenda.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that the British Motor Show in some way can fill that void,
Yeah. It's an opportunity.
particularly from an industry point of view.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Geneva and Paris always provide that opportunity for industry professionals to network.
Yeah.
You know, they won't be able to do that through Paris and so on. So hopefully the British Motor Show will provide that opportunity. So we're getting, you know, seek involvement from the government and so on to help us kind of leverage the opportunity to use it as an industry event on that first day. And then the other days are much more about experiential events and just having a good family day out.
Yeah. Yeah.
At a budget that's sensible. Because you know, there have been versions of the event at the Excel, London Excel previously, which to be, you know, they were good events, but they turned out to be quite expensive events because, you know, the Excel, you got to pay for parking. It was quite costly, the ticket prices. This is a lot better value. So I'm hoping it will be a great family day out. If you're in the market to buy something, you'll be able to compare and contrast pretty much everything that's on the market today. And you'll also be able to seek the advice of experts, including you, I hope. I hope you'll join us as well.
Oh, I would so love to be involved. As you know, I was heavily involved in the Dubai Motor Show, so I'd so love to be involved in that. I think I've got to get Andy on one of these as well and talk to him a little bit more about his plans for this. Anyway, we're coming up against the end of the, well, we have actually gone over the time clock, but I can't leave you without asking you about this kind of collection that you're creating, which seems to be a pop-up lights theme in your own personal car collection that you're going for, right?
Well, yeah, my wife is slightly worried about it because my front of my house is beginning to look like a bit of a parking lot now. So
you got a Porsche 944 and you got the Toyota, the Mr. 2, right?
The MR2, yes, the Mark 1 MR2, which, to be fair, the 944 and the MR2 are kind of investments that I've made with my eldest son, who's 19 at university, and he's been kind of working on the side to, you know, build up this, pile of cash, modest pile of cash, which is thrown into these two semi-classic cars, I guess, and I've sort of helped him out a bit. And the hope is that they will appreciate and value. He's done the research to work out that the Mart 1 MR2 and the Porsche 944 will hopefully only go up in value. He bought them at a great price, and they're both fantastic cars to drive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you've done the right thing there. I think you should continue with the pop-up theme. I want to see what you guys get next, because that's going to be really fascinating.
What would you recommend?
Oh, don't get me started. I think that's a whole other video.
Yeah.
We might have to do another one. Jim, it's been great to talk to you. I've really gone well over the clock, and it always happens when the conversation is as fascinating and as interesting as this one. So thanks so much for doing this, and we'll keep in touch. Any links where people may be able to find where you're working, I'll put them in the description below, and speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Shazad. All the best with everything, and look forward to catching up soon.
Whoa, didn't I say that there would be a lot to learn from that conversation? Particularly if you are working in, or if you want to work in the areas of digital automotive. I think that was an absolute masterclass of not only the history, but how to make things work. I think I certainly learned something there. And also, I got to say, I love his two cars that he's got, and so I'm quite envious about that as well. A great chap, great conversation. I hope you enjoyed that. Do let me know what you thought of it in the comments above, below, elsewhere around this video. And of course, again, got to do my own marketing. Make sure that you subscribe to youtube.com/browncarguy. Make sure you follow me on all social media channels. Just search for #browncarguy on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Of course, subscribe to browncarguy.com. And if you enjoy my videos and my content, then maybe you can support me, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/Shazad Sheikh, and there you can find some exclusive content and also maybe some goodies like this hat. Do go check it out. Even if you can't do that, then just please continue to like, share, comment, subscribe, and share it. Tell all your friends. That's greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in the next one.